So this week I've had the opportunity to sit down with the Geordie Saver and just chat about all things YouTube and personal finance related. We recorded the conversation, and so I thought it'd be worth uploading it here, and this will make up the second part of the conversation that we had, which I'll leave links to down in the description, which is hosted over on the Geordie Savers channel. In the conversation we covered all sorts of bits and pieces. We've covered why he started his YouTube channel. He's also got an Instagram and a website which he talks about a little bit in the chat as well. A bit about his personal finance journey, so how he's reached the point that he has, a bit about his mortgage overpayments. He's got a book that he's thinking about writing, so we touch on that for a little bit, as well as a bit of past advice to himself and a bit of talk about how maybe some of the FCA guidance might impact channels that talk about finance like ours. I really enjoyed this conversation, so if you have a YouTube channel that talks vaguely about personal finance, business, investing, any of those kind of general topics, do reach out if you're interested in having a chat, because I'd love to engage with you and have a conversation along these lines. But without further ado, here's the recording. So thanks for joining me today, Geordie Saver. It's been a little while since we did our return of this sort of interview chat style. I hesitate to call it a podcast, it's maybe not quite that yet, but we'll see what it turns into as we roll. It's going to be quite sort of informal, just a bit of a sort of chit chat. When we did the reverse, it was lots of questions about me. So I'm just conscious that we want to turn that on its head and get a bit more about you, maybe introduce you to some of the people who watch my channel, maybe just give people who watch your channel a bit more information, a bit of depth about you that maybe you just sort of haven't had a chance to explain on your channel just because of the style of videos that come out and things like that. So yeah, instead of me muttering on, let me pass over to you. Do you want to introduce yourself? Maybe a bit about sort of where you're from, what you like to do hobbies wise. Just, yeah, fill us in the blanks.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, thanks for having us on. So, as you said, I'm the Geordie Saver. I'm from Newcastle in the northeast of England. I'm in my early 30s. I did a maths degree at university, and then I got a graduate job in that field. I've been fortunate to earn above average salary since graduating, and the benefit of living in the northeast is that it is a very low cost of living area. So we have some of the cheapest, I think we do have actually the cheapest housing in the UK. And I I post videos on my YouTube channel about my mortgage overpayment journey and about my savings and my investment journey, and sort of a bit of background to me in terms of what I like to do. So I'm very much kind of experience driven. So I like, traveling, having different experiences. Also, going to concerts, theatre. And I think, we'll probably come on to it, but a lot of my drive comes from trying to design my ideal life and having time freedom and being able to do the things I enjoy without worrying too much about the costs, because I've got the money there. So yeah, so that's a bit about me.
I think that was something that sort of came out in our previous chat, wasn't it? That we both quite like being able to have a bit of money behind us so we can just enjoy experiences and things like that maybe otherwise we'd have to pass up. So yeah, let's dive in straight onto that then. Geordie Saver, I know you've got an Instagram page as well. Do you want to just give us a bit of an update about why you decided to start documenting this as a journey, and where do you want to take it in the future? Any plans? What you enjoy doing about it? If there's anything you don't enjoy doing about it?
Yeah. So in the start of 2022, I decided to start my own Instagram page. I'd enjoyed reading kind of personal finance blogs and following along on pages online for a while. And, I quite like, to be honest, I quite like YouTube as a form more than Instagram. But I do like reading blogs, and a lot of bloggers have an Instagram page. So for me, the reason I started was just because of probably the geographic thing. Like, a lot of content creators are always based in London or in the South, and sometimes they'll fall within a very similar demographic. Now, I'm part of the demographic in some sense. I'm someone who's been to university. I'm a white male, and I'm earning above average salary. So I tick a lot of those boxes, but at the same time, kind of where I think there's maybe a gap is people who are from backgrounds like in the northeast and who are talking about these things, about doing things with their money that's maybe not as mainstream for everyone who's in that location. So I think there's probably um, a lack of Northeast finance content creators. So I'm trying to plug that gap a bit.
Balance it
And
out.
yeah, but and I think for me, it's I know you probably experienced this yourself. It's a big step when you sort of think about sharing
Mm,
personal bits about your money online.
yeah,
But it's hard to really be authentic online if you're not sharing aspects of your life about money, because otherwise it just seems it's quite generic
mm,
content that you're putting out there if you're not actually giving a bit of your own backstory and talking about your finances. But there's a lot of people I talk to in real life, friends, family, who money's a bit of a taboo subject, or like you don't ask
yeah,
people what they do with their money. So the one thing I do love about Instagram particularly is that it just opens up that conversation, and then people can find your page who maybe have just started thinking about money. And they're interested in knowing more about it or knowing what other people are doing, and you can just open up that conversation. So the one thing I probably say I like about Instagram, um, is that it has that community feel. So, I'll get messages or I'll respond to people's sort of stories on Instagram about what they're doing. And then, you have that conversation about um like how are you handling this situation? So for example, the other week I've just started selling some of my old stuff on Vinted. Now I hadn't used Vinted before. So I
I think my
asked
wife is addicted.
I asked people on my Instagram page for some tips about selling stuff on Vinted, and within half an hour, I had some really useful tips about postage and um, kind of weighing things and how to package them, and it's that sort of thing that I find Instagram really useful for. And then
Mm,
YouTube, posting updates, you get feedback from people who've been in your situation before and who are maybe further along in their finance journey, and they share nuggets of information. Or on the other end, you might have someone who's just starting out with a mortgage who watches the video and says, "Oh, I hadn't really thought about overpaying my mortgage, but now I've watched this, I might consider it," which is really good.
do you think sort of having, because you're kind of anonymous, aren't you? Sort of pseudo anonymous. You go by sort of a name. Do you think that helps with this kind of sort of taboo subject where people don't like talking about money? Do you think it helps people engage if they feel like there's almost like a small degree of separation, isn't there? Because they can have the conversation with a real person, but they don't know you, as it were. So you're not there in their day-to-day lives. Do you think that helps with that, or
Yeah, I mean, I think so. Part of the reason about being anonymous is, I mean, just for people's context, me and you are having a conversation via video, so we know what you know what I look like, and I think it's important for like one-on-one conversations like that. Like video is fine. I think for me, putting myself online, I think we talked about it in the podcast sort of style episode that we did on my channel. It's I find it a brave thing to do to put, and it's hard then in my work life to know that people in my work would know
yeah,
about all the ins and outs of my life that I'm posting online. So I think that's what probably
yeah,
pre prevents us from doing it. But at the same time, I also think there's maybe something in about, I think the messaging can be slightly different if someone's just hearing it audio. Like they're probably honing on the message a bit more than what opinions might be about the person. So I think we're all fall into a trap of um making judgments, whether they're good judgments or bad judgments about people when they see them online. And I think because people don't see my face when I'm talking, or they're not being distracted by um, what's going on in the background or what I look like, that actually maybe honing on the message, or that's what I want people to do. I mean, I compare it to when I read a book. I've got no idea about what the author looks like. I just know what they're writing about, and I think that's what
yeah,
probably I aspire to be a bit more like. Yeah, if someone's listening to my message, I want them to listen to the message and not about like anything about me.
yeah. That's fair enough. I think when we spoke last time, you asked like why I'd gone sort of public with it and how I felt about that. And I think I made an offhand comment about if someone I know finds it, I must be going okay. So someone I know has found my channels. That was quite an interesting. sort of like conversation. I have no idea how they found it, but
Wow. Yeah, it's an interesting one actually because it's similar to that. I was having a one of my friends needed some help with a maths problem they were doing with work. So they said, "Oh, can I send you a Zoom link and come on and chat about it?" Well, I thought if they sent it to my personal email, the Zoom would sign me in with my personal one, but it actually signed us in with the Geordie Saver one. So I popped up and they were like, "Why are you called the Geordie Saver?" And obviously it had my logo on, and I got so embarrassed. I mean, I explained it to them, but it actually ended up being quite a useful conversation because we ended up talking about money and what their perspective of money was, and their partner was actually starting to get interested in finances, so they were really looking forward to watching my videos to find out my opinion. So I think it probably went better than I thought because
yeah,
I sort of worried that it would be first and foremost judgment or embarrassment from someone, but actually it wasn't.
yeah, I've still not quite worked out how I feel about it, so I'm still mulling that one over at my end. um, you touched on your blog as well. I know you were when we last spoke, you were thinking about sort of doing a bit of an update to the blog. Um, I think you had it hosted on Blogger. Is that have you sort of got round to doing that update yet? I must admit I haven't checked in for a little while.
Yeah, so I've now bought the domain name, and I've got, well, the sort of provider that I'm going with, I paid for it, and it's like a sort of inbuilt, like the blog's design basically.
Okay, yeah.
Um, but I bought the domain for 5 years, I think, and I yeah, so I had a blogger account which was free for maybe the 2 years, and I was writing ad hoc blog posts. But I think one of my goals with my account, if I've kind of got like a pipe dream goal, would be eventually if maybe a newspaper or a media outlet would have me kind of blog about money on, like be a guest blogger or something, just to sort of reach more people. But to do
Mm.
that, I guess I wasn't really happy with how unprofessional my blogger looked, if you know what I mean. And like, I think when you've got like a dot something .co.uk at your like dot blogger or dot blogspot, I think it probably comes across a bit more amateur than you having your own domain. So that was a bit of the driver. And I have posted a few blogs, but to be honest, and it's one of my aims to be a bit more in the habit of writing
Mm.
blogs. I mean, I enjoy doing it, but I find it a lot more effort than just talking on YouTube, because for me, I don't really rehearse what I say on YouTube. I just update my spreadsheet, press record, and share my screen, and it's a
Yeah.
bit like a therapy. I don't know if you find this a bit of a therapeutic thing to do sometimes. Just talk about what's in your mind and reflect on
Yeah.
how the months went, and then you post it, and then there's some discussion afterwards. But
Yeah.
a blog it's really easy to get down into a kind of self-critical route of
Yeah.
reading what you've written and then redoing it. So, but it is my aim to blog a bit more.
Yeah. I think I prefer writing over video. I think I've come to the conclusion that I synthesize my thoughts a lot better when I have to
Mm,
write it out. Um, whereas I don't know how you feel about it, but when I make some videos, I'll think about what I want to do. I'll bullet point it out. I'll, if there's any data I need to find so that I can quote the correct statistics, etc. I'll find that before the video. But with a blog, I feel like I have a lot more leeway to delve into it a lot more, because I feel like in video, if people think something's getting a bit complex, I feel like people just leave. I don't know. I
mm,
don't know how you feel about that. That's certainly how I feel on YouTube. If I'm watching a video, if someone can't like clarify a concept that's particularly tricky or something, then I just kind of give up on the video and we'll move on. Whereas if it's written, I can just reread it a couple of times and I'm more
yeah,
inclined to try and work it out. So also I've run websites before, so maybe I'm biased about writing, but I do think it's quite nice and actually find it quite therapeutic writing. I try and publish a newsletter once a week, and so that's quite a therapeutic sort of little sit down and write and synthesize my own thoughts, which is quite nice.
yeah.
Would you ever consider something like that, maybe like a newsletter, or is the kind of website a better focus, do you think, for you? Especially, I guess, if you want to maybe write a sort of newspaper column or something. It gives some evidence there that you can point someone towards. Whereas I've got to dig out old emails and stuff for for people who want to see my content.
Yeah, I mean, I do get your newsletter, and I think it is you. I think what's useful about it, it's like one communication once a week. So then people they know that they're getting that on a Friday that you send. Do you send yours out on a Friday? Is it or Thursday? Friday.
Friday.
Yeah, because I know I get your email. I'm like, all right, that's like there's a newsletter. I can like read that. Whereas I think sometimes when I guess with anything, it's consistency, isn't it? So for me, I haven't been very consistent on the blogging front. So would someone know regularly to check that there's a post there? Probably not. Whereas the ideal would be actually if I every Saturday, if I put a blog post up, then people might regularly return because that's what I do with blogs that I read. I know when the schedule is and I know like when I'm going to refresh that page to read something that's new. So
Yeah.
it's probably about building that habit a bit. And you see it on YouTube a bit. I mean, I don't have specific days that I upload, but the start of the month, I'll always post my mortgage overpayment update, within a day or two. So it's trying to be a bit more consistent.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my question is, do you have, as someone who doesn't actually have Instagram, because I think I would just doom scroll, do you do sort of regular posting on that at set times? Because I've heard mixed sort of discussions about it. Some people are like, yeah, you must post consistently on the same days because that's how people know to come back to you. But I feel like personally, I don't know, I just kind of stumble across things. I don't necessarily like a lot of the YouTubers and things that I watch, for example, I have no idea if they have a schedule. I just kind
Yeah.
of watch it if it comes up in the subscribe feed or recommended for me. Don't know what your take is on that.
Yeah, I mean, Instagram's a funny one because I find um growth in Instagram really hard. I think the one of the benefits of YouTube is that you can start as someone who's small with no subscribers, and if you've got a video that's being searched a lot by people, then it can kind of pick up in the algorithm, and you might have videos where you've only had 10 views on them, and then suddenly you'll have one video that piques someone's interest and a lot of people's interest, and you end up with 1,000 views on it, which is
Yeah,
great. But Instagram doesn't, I don't find that it works like that. I find it's very hard for people to find new accounts unless it's either been shared from someone else on their story or it's ended up on like a for you page. And I posted about this before on my YouTube that I've tried boosting posts with Instagram so you can pay money for an Instagram ad where they'll basically boost one of your posts. So maybe 1,000 people might see it, and then from the people that see it, a proportion of them will probably click on and follow you. So that's been useful in terms of getting up follower numbers, but with it not being truly organic, it just
mm,
doesn't really feel like an achievement, if you see what I mean. I mean, I've sort of I've sort of increased the pot of people that I'm um talking to, but actually I'm like, are they actual genuine people who are engaged, or did they just see something and click follow, but they weren't really invested in my journey?
yeah. I feel like that just kind of happens on social media, doesn't it? I've had the same thing with YouTube. I In March I had like a massive growth of subscribers because I had two or three videos just pop off. But then later videos I've posted, I haven't seen the same kind of ratios of engagement. I think maybe the videos that popped off weren't the ones that best represented my channel, or maybe it's just sort of tourists who come. But I don't know. It's quite interesting to see, as someone who's never run a sort of social media account before. It's quite interesting to see the kind of cogs that work in the background behind that. And yeah, so even though the pot of subscribers, as it were, is bigger, I don't feel like the engagement is necessarily better, and it's harder as well as you get more people to have proper engagement, to have those conversations, because it just becomes a lot more time consuming, doesn't it, when you get
Yeah.
more comments? And I've noticed I get a lot more like spam comments now, especially if I post something vaguely adjacent to like crypto, and then it's just like I'm just having to delete these automatic comments as quick as
Mm.
they appear. But yeah,
Yeah. And I think that's one of the things with YouTube and social media, and particularly on YouTube, I think it's trying not to be obsessed with numbers going up, because I think I trying to get in the habit of classifying kind of a video being successful or not as to how many people have engaged in a discussion in the comments. So some
Mm.
videos are published might, like, on the surface you might look and you think, oh, it's only got 200 views, but actually if I've got 10 comments there, people who are sharing their journey or their thoughts about overpaying a mortgage, then actually I'm like, oh well, that's really good, because if I was in a work scenario and 100 people decided to come and listen to us speak and were really engaged and asking loads of questions at the end, everyone would be going, wow, this is amazing. But sometimes when it's online, you don't really think of it that way, and it's so easy to compare yourself with actual full-time YouTubers who have clickbait titles and
Yeah.
are getting hundreds of thousands of views. You can think, oh, actually, 100 views isn't good, but actually, it it is good. When you think of it, if they are actual people watching from the start to the end of a video, and you're keeping them engaged for 5 to 10 minutes, then I think that's a success.
Yeah. Right, I'm probably going to shift the conversation a little bit because people probably realize we're mostly finance channels and we haven't spoken about anything finance related
Yeah.
yet. Tell me a little bit about your financial journey then. I know a big part of your YouTube journey that you're sharing publicly is your overpaying of your mortgage. Tell me a little bit about how that came around, why that was has been your primary focus. Do you see that staying like that? Yeah, just give me a bit of context.
Yeah, so I overpay my mortgage, as you said. Me and my partner got our mortgage in 2017. I think it's always been a goal of mine because my parents paid their mortgage off when I think my mum was just turned 50 and my dad was in his mid 50s. And I think growing up, because my parents didn't really know much about other forms of kind of personal finance, like other forms of building wealth, like investing as such. They their messaging to me and my siblings was always about, you know, once you've got your house paid off, then you'll be in a really good position. So that filtered through to me, and I think with work, I enjoy my job, but I don't like feeling stuck and I don't like feeling trapped. And I think one of my biggest fears is being in a scenario where I'm doing a job that's stressful that I don't like, and there's no way out of that situation because I've got a big mortgage or I've got really high living expenses. So cutting those expenses by paying down my mortgage and being mortgage free, at the moment my mortgage is quite small. It's, well, comparatively to other people in the country, £500 a month is our mortgage. And the way I look at it, with interest rates um, as they are, that's probably going to go up over the next few years. So if I don't have that £500 a month that's needed for a mortgage payment, then I can use that elsewhere, or I can reduce my hours at work. So that's really been the driver. I mean, going forward, I do invest in my stock and shares ISA, and I do save money in premium bonds, which I'm doing alongside it because I think one of the risks, even though overpaying your mortgage, you're paying down a debt. There's not a risk in that sense, but the risk, I guess, is the opportunity cost, and also being maybe over kind of leveraged in an asset which isn't very liquid. So once I overpay my mortgage, that money effectively is locked away, and I can only get that money back if I was to remortgage and take that money, like borrow that money back from the bank, which I don't really want to do. So if a scenario came up in the future and I needed, a few £1,000s, then I really need to work on having that amount of money available that's not locked away in the mortgage. So that's been on my mind, and I am trying to build my stock and shares ISA, and then some readily available cash as well. Because I think what I've found is that I've been through periods where I've just chucked everything at the mortgage, but then at the same time, by doing that, I've got the end of the month and felt like I've got no money, and then I felt um quite like I'm living a bit of too much of a frugal life, and for me, when you work hard in a job, and you do need those treats, and you do need that opportunity to sort of let your hair down a bit and have wiggle room in your budget. So yeah, so I've been at that side of the coin of like being over enthusiastic about um paying down
Yeah,
debt, and it didn't really work out well.
it's definitely a trap that I feel like, yeah, certainly a trap that I feel like I could get into, especially I'm fine living quite a simple life. Like, if I sat in the garden with a book and I did that like every day, I'd be quite happy, I think. And that's quite sort of a cheap way of living. Um, so I think I am probably inclined that way as well for that kind of, I'm very happy to delay the gratification and that kind of side of things. Um, yeah, so it's quite interesting to hear that. I'd be interested to hear then if that's your kind of semi-natural inclination. Has that changed since I don't know how long you've been together with your partner for. Has it sort of changed as family dynamics have changed?
Yeah, so I think my so it's interesting because my parents are like very opposite in how they sort of spend their money. So my dad is very much a home bird who is quite happy having the same routine each day. And my dad literally spends the least amount of money of anyone I know. So he would not go like, so he's the extreme where he doesn't really like going on holiday. He's happy being in the house, going for the occasional walk. Whereas my mum is very much wants to live life, loves going on holiday. Um, and even though I wouldn't really class her as a sort of spender in the sense that she does spend, but she only spends what she's got. So she's not really one of those
Yeah.
spenders that you see that kind of puts um purchases on credit cards or whatever. It's not
Yeah.
that type, but they are opposites there. And I,
Relative to each other. Yeah.
yeah, and like I see that in my relationship with my partner. So we've been together 12 years now, but the I didn't really notice until we started living together how different we were with money. So my partner, if they want something, they don't really ask the question about whether they can afford it. They just know that'll work out and they'll be able to manage and they'll be able to work it. Whereas for
Mm.
me, because of how I was brought up as well, it was always very much like you don't you don't buy something until you've got the money for it. I mean, obviously, house aside, because no one's gonna be able to buy a house in cash, but like going on a holiday, for example, my parents wouldn't put it on kind of a credit and then pay it off when they're back from holiday. It was always, it'll feel so much better once you've saved up that money and bought it. And to be honest, like I think my partner being a spender isn't, and I say he's a spender, it's a spender compared to me, comparatively to me.
Yeah.
But I think we balance each other out, which is quite good. So there's times when things crop up that are quite nice experiences we could have. And sometimes I'll err on the side of caution, even though I've got the money there and be like, oh, but what happens if this? And my partner will be like, yes, but this is only going to come round once in a couple
Yeah.
of years. So, take the opportunity now. So it's quite good. Now I balance him out in terms of trying to encourage him to think about having some money set aside for worst case scenarios because it's great being an optimist, but you don't want to be an optimist where you think everything's always going to go nice and rosy, and then something comes along that's unexpected, and you've got no money to sort it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, yeah, I completely agree. I mean, in my household, it's the same. Relative, my wife, she's not a spender really, but relative to me, she is. So we sort of balance each other out quite nicely, I think.
Yeah, and
Um,
it is interesting because some of the podcasts I listen to, this sort of dynamics between partners crops up a lot, and it seems like a lot of people who are interested in personal finance and who are, wanting to follow the FIRE movement, it's quite rare that both partners are on the same page. You normally have one who's really enthusiastic and someone who's really just going along being taken along for the journey and who really doesn't really think much about the finances. So I think what's amazing to me is that some people don't think in depth about money to the level that I do, because for me, like the only reason I go to work is because money, like I would still work in some capacity, but I wouldn't be doing the job necessarily that I do now. I wouldn't have the being part of like a hierarchical structure where you've got a manager and you've got to have check-ins and appraisals. If it wasn't for monetary gain, I would probably not be part of that structure. So it kind of blows my mind that people don't think a lot about money, because for me it's like it's so life changing if you do something right with money and you can sort of ensure that you're spending your day doing things you want to do rather than things that you're forced to do.
Yeah, I think planning with it is really important, isn't it? If you can, just have that kind of emergency fund, there's so much sort of peace in that. If the boiler goes and you're waiting for an insurance payout to replace it, if you can just deal with it up front and have the cash flow to do
Yeah.
that, it's such a just moment of peace where you'd be absolutely panicking if you didn't have that behind you. Um, what happens after the mortgage payoff then, or is it a case of as you pay it off, you'd be looking for a new house? I don't know whether where you live is where you see yourself long term, or whether you'd be looking to buy somewhere bigger, or whether you just pay it off and that is the point when that buys you a lot of freedom. What does the roadmap look like?
Um, so this is something I mull over a bit. In one sense, I think do we just use more time freedom with it? So do we go part time with working? The other side is whether we put more money into our stock and shares ISAs, so invest more money. And then the other side is maybe taking a career break. So I haven't quite worked out which one I want to do.
So still a bit up in the air then.
Yes, very up in the air. Um, I think because we're due to pay off our mortgage by the time we're in our early 40s, um, we've got plenty of time to decide what we want to do. Um,
Yeah.
but it's hard to know about moving house and lifestyle inflation. So we live in a small two-bedroom flat, which is great for us at the moment. But the question comes up, do we move into a house? And for me, I think I'd be putting more of my money into a property and also the upkeep of a bigger property. And there's a
Mm,
bit about, if our kind of ideal life is being able to take career breaks, travel, we probably want to have as little kind of responsibility back at home as possible. So I could imagine leaving a flat for a month to travel would be fine. But if we left a house, I'd maybe feel a bit more worried.
yeah. I guess at this time of the year as well, I feel like I'm spending all my free time tackling the garden, mowing the grass, hacking at like random bushes and things that are in the garden. I know on your channel then you've spoken a bit about sort of emergency funds and sort of troubles you've had with sort of dipping into it every now and again. Do you, it, I know you've been trying to change up how you approach emergency funds a little bit. Can you sort of shed some light on that for people? What are your sort of bad habits in a way, and how are you trying to sort of tackle them or overcome them?
Yeah, so I think it all stems from the fact that I follow the finance methodology of paying myself first at the start of the month. So when I get my pay, once my essential living expenses are out the way, I overpay the mortgage, I put money aside for investments, put money in premium bonds and so on. And then what I've got left is what I budget for the month.
Mm,
But I'm never really into the habit of putting like designating that money to certain things. It's like I've got a pot of money and then I just spend from that in the month. And what I found myself doing is things will crop up in the month, like I don't know, a concert that I really want to go to. And because part of my dream life or like rich life if is Ramit calls it. I don't know if you've heard of Ramit Sethi,
yeah, I
I'll
can't
teach
remember
you.
his surname, but the guy
Yeah,
has the book about "I'll teach you to be rich."
yeah, so he talks about a rich life, and that's probably one aspect of his philosophy that I really sort of resonate with. The idea that, you have things that other people might not value and spend money on, but you do. So like one thing for me and my partner is we really like going to the theater, and we're really like going to see concerts. And the thing about going to see people in concert on tours is that people sometimes only tour once every few years. So things might
Mm,
crop up and it's random. Like you don't know when someone's going to announce that they're going on tour, and then they do, and then I'll pay for tickets to go, and I'll then have no money left at the end of the month. So then to sort of buy my last week of food shopping, I dip into my emergency fund.
yeah.
And I think I found that the reason I started saving in premium bonds kind of a bit more. aggressively, I'll call it, a few months ago, because I used to just have like £100 sitting in my premium bonds. The reason I started saving more into them was because there's a barrier, like there's friction there for you getting the money out. So even though it's easy to get the money out of premium bonds, it still takes a couple of days for it to go into your bank account.
Yeah,
Whereas if I've got an emergency fund, I can easily get it from my bank account.
yeah. There's just that incentive there, isn't there, to just pull out if the money's there. It almost feels like you've got a good excuse to just spend the money when it's sitting there. I know I've got the same. So the way my wife and we kind of run our accounts is we have one current account that salaries and things like that get paid into, all the direct debits, etc., get pulled out of that. And then we pay ourselves a certain amount into like a Monzo joint account each month. And that's got like a pots feature where you can dish money out for separate things. Um, and we have a pot set up that's just kind of for long term stuff that has a little bit of a delay in getting the money out. And it just means, I don't know, for me personally, there's no incentive to try and pull money out of there because I know there's some friction when for me it's almost easier to pull it out from somewhere else. But then
Yeah.
in my head that's kind of compartmentalized, and I'm not sure if I'd be able to guess my passwords for some of my other accounts because I don't log in enough.
Yeah, yeah. And I have, one of the things going forward that I'm trying to do and that I'm tracking on my YouTube channel is being a bit more disciplined about having pots in my bank account that are designated for certain things. So if I have an experiences pot, once that runs to zero, be like, right, I have to wait before I purchase any more. And having like those long-term kind of savings goals in there as well.
There's, I don't know who you bank with as well, but I quite enjoy those roundup features that you can get on bank accounts. I don't know whether you find those particularly useful because I know some of them round up to the nearest pound, but you can also set them on some places where they'll round up to a pound plus to the nearest pound or something along those lines. I don't know if you find those quite handy or have used those.
Yeah, so at the moment I've started like a cash buffer account, which is those roundup. So every time I make a purchase, it goes into my cash buffer account. So it means at the end of the month, if I am struggling for money, then I can use that little pot before I use my emergency fund.
Let's shift the conversation again a little bit. I know on your channel you've talked a bit about an Etsy shop that you have and sort of making some extra money. Can you sort of flesh out your thinking around that? How you've got into the position where you are? We have a few products now in your Etsy shop, don't you? I've seen in some of your updates on your channel that you make the occasional sale now, which is must be quite encouraging to see. Um, where do you want to take that in the future? What's the reasoning behind it? Yeah, how much time are you dedicating to it as well, I guess?
Yeah, so I think probably a few months ago, I think one of the sort of self-limiting beliefs I wanted to try and disprove was the bit about not being able to make any money online because I've never made money online, and even though I've got ideas about different saving tools that could kind of provide for people to use, I sort of had this idea that no one's going to buy them. So I thought, you know what, I'm actually going to challenge this and I'm going to upload. So my monthly mortgage overpayment videos, I use a template that I created myself that just tracks my start balance, how much I've overpaid, what the end balance is, and then has some summary stats about how much I've paid off in that year. So I basically put a blank template on Etsy that people can buy. So if someone watches my video and wants to sort of chart or track their journey in a similar way, then they can buy that spreadsheet. And I charge like pretty much the price of a coffee. So I think it's just over £2 that someone has to pay for that. And then I also created a printable savings challenge as well. And I've had like 6 sales so far on each of them. So it's a couple of pound each month that goes into my account.
That's quite nice. Does that go into your roundup pot as well as or does that get thrown into overpayments, or what do you do with that money at the end, or is it reinvested into tools and making more sheets and things like that?
So at the moment, it's just in it's a bank account called the Geordie Saver, which is just growing because it's a bit of a test of how much money can I make from this sort of Geordie Saver account. I think the thing about it going forward is whether I want to continue with the model of charging people for it or whether I want to open it up to put it for free resource on my website.
Yeah. I've had the same kind of thoughts because I've got a couple of free resources on mine, but I know some of the things that you put together, it can take a long while to put them together. It's almost quite nice for someone just to chip in with a, pound, £2 as a little thank you. But
Yeah, it's a hard one because some of mine are around budgeting, and I think do I want look from a values perspective,
yeah,
do I
same.
want someone who is trying to budget, pay money for a spreadsheet? I don't know if it aligns with my values.
Yeah, that's fair enough, I think. Yeah, I think because I guess most of my tools are more sort of investment based. That's more likely to be people with sort of disposable income, although I don't really charge for them. But yeah, are there any other tools that you definitely want to make things? I know you mentioned you've got a budgeting spreadsheet, you've got the sort of savings challenge. Are you sort of actively looking at other things you want to build out? Is there like a full suite of tools you want to build for people, or is it just a kind of ad hoc? You think, oh, this would be useful for someone?
Um, I have a few ideas about how to get kids interested in money saving,
Hmm.
that I want to do. So one of them, for example, I mean, I'll say it here. If someone pinches the idea, then I'm not going to be too fussed. I'll do my own version.
Take them on.
But is somewhat is like an idea where kids doing chores, you have some sort of random generator where like there's a random generator of tasks that they have to do, and then a random generator of amounts that they can earn for it.
Yeah, what sort of gamify the task making where I don't know, the kid does a chore and then they can go onto the spreadsheet, hit the button, see how much money pops up as their kind of thank you from the parents for doing it.
Exactly, because I think the idea behind it would be that not all chores result in a monetary reward. So it's a bit random, like some of the ones where you'll get a fiver and some of the ones where you'll just get a thank you.
That'd be quite fun. I can. I'm just picturing back to like past Chaz when he's a kid, like just trying to get all the chores done, just sort of gamifying it, doesn't it? It's probably quite useful for parents. I'm not a parent yet, but I can imagine that would be quite useful.
Yeah, so that's a plan. But things like that, I'd probably be happy to do for free, publish for free, see if
Mm.
there's an interest, and then get some feedback on what people want to see. Because I think that's one thing I don't really know is what the gaps are in the sort of market of tools. So like what are people finding useful that they'd like to see more of in that space? Because like some of the things I've done, it's really kind of replicating what other people have done. Um, so that would be a thing. I mean, the other thing is that I use Excel, and not everyone has Excel, like an Excel license, like Microsoft Excel. So I think move going forward, I want to do more in Google Sheets because, as far as I understand, it's free to use for everyone. I think maybe you just need a Google account.
Yeah, I'm a big Google Sheets fan. I think pretty much all my stuff happens on Google Sheets now. It's quite useful as well, just because I don't know, like my phone's connected to my Google account and stuff as well, so I can be sitting on the sofa working on something at the same time. I don't have to be in front of the computer, which I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, whether that encourages you to be doing work
Yeah,
sometimes.
no, that's a good idea. Yeah, so I think because I think that's I've uploaded these Excel templates to Etsy, and some of the questions I get from people is it only available in Excel, or can I do it in Google Sheets? So that's probably an avenue I want to explore. But because I never use Google Sheets, I haven't really invested the time in learning
Mm.
at the moment. I'm assuming it's very similar to Excel, but I'm not really sure what all the differences are in terms of formulas.
Yeah, it's pretty much identical in many ways. There's just minor differences in some of the formulas, but it's a bit like Excel in that if you get stuck, you just Google it and
Yeah.
someone has done some answer or there's a good help page or something along those lines. So you've got the Etsy shop. Is there? I know there's potentially a book on the horizon that you've kind of spoke about.
Yes.
You'd love to
Yeah.
do one
So
day.
so one of my goals is to self-publish a personal finance book. Um, for me, the sort of theme of the book that I'm writing is more, it's not really about how to do things because I think there's lots of books out there and resources about how to invest, how to pay off a mortgage and so on. It's more just about kind of my money stories, like so things that have shaped me as I've grown up, so um things that I've been through that have um made me think about money in a different way. So upbringing, I had a few operations when I was younger, which really shaped how I view um kind of material things. So there's bits about that, and I think probably some of it is it's a goal that I've always wanted to do of write something, and whether it sells copies or not, the sort of process of doing it will be quite a good achievement for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and just touching on that, I mean, I mentioned the operation. Like I had a heart operation. Well, I had an operation on my chest when I was 18. So I was born with a chest deformity, and I had a operation that put a metal bar in my chest when I was 18. So I had to take a year out of university. So I hadn't started university. I just had to defer my place, which was a big thing, obviously, when I was
Yeah.
18.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately, when I had the operation to get the bar removed, the surgeon accidentally hit my heart. So I had to have open heart surgery to repair it. Um, which, like, fortunately, I was very lucky that I didn't have any long-term impacts of that. They were able to stitch my heart up, what
Yeah.
have you. But the recovery of that made us really think about what it is I value in life. So I think friends and family and experiences I put a lot more emphasis on other than material things.
Mm. Yeah. I think I think that's quite a common thing when I speak to people that I know as well. I think people would rather, spend an afternoon with friends or family or go on a sort of holiday with some friends than, I don't know, have a new laptop or bigger TV or whatever it might be that someone might want. Um, yeah. I do have people on YouTube won't see this, but I've been experimenting with some like self-publishing stuff recently, which has been quite fun. So if you ever get to the point where you need some chat, it's quite satisfying to get some books that you've kind of published, printed off,
Oh
and sent to you,
wow!
which is good fun. But
So if, is that like old material that you've written before, or is it like new stuff that you've published
it's
in?
it's all new stuff. It's without giving too much away for an upcoming video. There's some that are very sort of low content books. They're more like journally type books. And then there's one that's a higher content book that's about 8,000 words that I put together, which was just quite fun to have that. Although the one that I put the most effort into has sold no copies, which is always great fun. But the other ones have sold copies, which
Oh
is
wow, that's really
which is quite
good.
interesting.
I,
Um,
and I'm assuming, well, you'll probably cover this in your upcoming video, but is that all through Kindle Direct Publishing, like the Amazon sort of route?
Yeah, so it was. So yeah, I made all. So there's four books that you won't have seen on the camera. There's four books there. Sort of three of them are quite sort of low contenty type journaly type books, and one's a higher content book. I did them all in just over a week. Did all the covers myself. Did all the books myself. Got them all uploaded. So that's been quite an interesting experiment because that was about 2 months ago now. So I've got some data, and it is just yeah. I think covers is quite an interesting one. When you get to that, probably should have hired someone to make my covers rather than try to do them myself as a non-graphic designer. But but it's quite good fun. I had a good time making them. But yeah, it's quite interesting seeing behind the scenes how it all works because I think it's a great sort of model for someone who wants to publish their own book in that you don't have to go the traditional publishing route because I know someone who is going the traditional publishing route with a book and it just seems to be dragging on for ages. I think her like agent is telling her that it could be like 12 months after she like her first manuscript has gone off by the time she starts like hearing back and then they might want edits and there's no guarantee they'll take it on and all this kind of stuff. So it just seems like it gives me a lot more respect for authors, like seeing that process. Um, I guess the benefit of a traditional publishing route is they do the marketing for you, which is also not another
Yeah.
strong point for me.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing because I think, oh, when I finish off writing my book, shall I go through a traditional publishing route? But then one side of it is, oh yes, do that, try it out. But then the other side of it thinks, if my whole YouTube journey is me doing it, me, posting my own videos, no one sort of editing it apart
Mm.
from me. I think, does it seem authentic to go through the route where probably, I imagine what probably happens is I would write a draft of it and then someone would restructure what I've done and edit it or
Your
make
life
it,
story.
yeah, like change it. And I think, oh, I don't know if I'm releasing something that's not in my own words, especially when it's, biographical in this sense, like, would I would I appreciate it as much? I don't know, maybe not. So
Yeah.
maybe I don't know enough about that editing process to know what it's like. But yeah, it's a bit like in school where you think you've written something really well, and then someone edits it and go, "Oh, no, puts this paragraph here, this here, did it?" And I'm like, "Oh, well, that's not what was in my head." So yeah.
Yeah, I seem to remember, I think it was like German at school, and we did like foreign languages. We had to do these like speaking pieces, and we'd write them all out beforehand, then kind of like learn some stock answers just to help us along when we were asked questions. I think my German teacher basically like half rewrote mine for me, and I think it was quite common as well because I think my sister, when she's slightly younger than me, did. I think yeah, it was German that she did as well, and got the same kind of thing where she ended up with some aunt who lives in Hamburg, and we're like, we just don't have a family member who lives in Hamburg. But yeah, I think that's the difference really between like a proofreader and an editor, isn't it? In that the
Yeah.
editor will chop and change things, and a proofreader is just there for your grammar and punctuation.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about the future then. Where do you see yourself in 5, 10 years? I mean, yeah, mortgage situation, just general financial situation and personal life, I guess.
Yeah, so uh the ideal would be that I want to be waking up on my 40th birthday, um, without a mortgage. I'll have said to my boss that I'll have agreed. I wouldn't have said I'll have agreed with my work that I'm taking a 12-month career break, and me and my partner have enough money in the bank to travel for um an extended period and really just make the most of kind of our 40th year. I think
Hmm.
that I think one of the worries that I have, and I think everyone probably has it if you're interested in personal finance and you're saving or you're investing, is that how do you balance the health that you have now, with also the sort of opportunities to save and invest that you have now. So it's a balance that I always struggle to
Hmm.
feel like I'm getting right.
Yeah.
And I think what I've learned is that I'll probably never get the balance right or never feel like I've got the balance right. But I think there's sort of two sides of the coin. Like, on one hand, I don't want to be someone who only spends money on experiences where there's no kind of, if you do something too often, I guess you don't really appreciate it as much. So if I say didn't overpay my mortgage by a penny and didn't invest, and I spent £10,000 a year on holidays, it probably would all become a bit meaningless after a while because I'd just become so used to it that it wouldn't be a treat. But
Yeah,
on the
I
other
get what you're
side of
saying.
yeah, on the other side of things, if I put all my money into investing or in my mortgage, I might get to my 40s and then I don't know, I might end up with some sort of health condition that I don't have currently, and it might really stop us from going traveling. Maybe that's not something I can do because actually maybe my mobility isn't as good. So I want to do something in the UK, not travel abroad. And I might think to myself, oh, I wish I'd just taken the opportunities when I was younger. So it's really trying to get that balance. So for me, I think I'm sort of happy in this sense of trying as much as possible to overpay my mortgage and save and invest in my 30s while also having, going to the theater, going to shows and having the occasional big trip every couple of years. And then maybe when I'm hit 40, I want to maybe pivot more towards the holiday and experience side of things with hopefully the knowledge that I'm mortgage free with a bit of money invested. So, you know, if I could have at least £30,000 or maybe £50,000 in a pot of investments that's just grown year on year, then it means that even if I was to sort of spend all the money that I earn, then I'll still have a choice about when I retire, or like I can retire early and use that pot that I've invested. So, I mean, my mind changes on it all the time because, but I think that's good. I think it's good to kind
Sort
of,
of flip flop between choices and
yeah, and like
you think
just,
about them all, isn't it?
yeah, and you sit with one for a while. Like, I might spend a month thinking, oh, this is what I'm going to do. And then something might happen in life, or I might have a chat with someone and I might think, actually, is that the model I want? And sometimes you don't know about different um different opportunities that you could that your life could look like until you speak to someone who's doing one of those. So I think sometimes I think of things, you can think of things as black and white. So you can think I'm either retired or I'm working full time, whereas actually there's a spectrum of
Yeah, in the
like
middle.
options in between. I can partially retire, I can work part time, take career breaks. Like, and actually, I'm probably more on the career breaks or like extended leave options. So maybe I don't know, every couple of years, if I was to take 3 or 4 months off, where I could have that to just recharge and travel, I think that would be really good. I sort of miss that about university, that every year you used to have
That's a
from,
summer holiday.
yeah, like do you like I don't know, I think at uni I used to finish my exams at the end of May and then I wasn't back until September. So it's 3 months, and the unfortunate thing is like I didn't have any money at university, but whereas if I could go back and I could have had the disposable income I have now at university when I had all that time off, it would have been like the
Live like a king.
ideal. Yeah, it would be ideal, but that's just not the way life works, and that's unfortunate because then when people are retired, my parents are retired now, um, and your health isn't as good as when you're younger. So my parents aren't inclined to go, oh, you know what, we're gonna go backpacking around Europe for 6 weeks. Let's sleep in
Yeah.
hostels. Like, no, they think that would be a nightmare. So it's more expensive if they want to go traveling because they want something that's a bit more home comforts than I guess that you
Yeah.
get away with when you're younger.
Yeah. Less backpacking, more resorts.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
So is that when you're going to pivot the Geordie Saver to being a travel vlogging channel as well? Then I did enjoy your Benidorm video.
Yes, yeah, and it's interesting that because I think even though I do personal finance, I think the whole having a YouTube channel, and I think you probably find this as well, it's a really nice creative outlet. So you can try different things. Like, I went on holiday to Benidorm with my parents, and we got a really good deal. So it was only £500 each for a week all inclusive. And I was like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna actually film a few clips of this and put it together and then put it on my YouTube. And actually the video did quite well. I think I've had 3,000 views on it.
Nice.
The sort of downside of that, and I think you touched on it earlier, is people subscribed on that video, but then the rest of my content's not like that. So you have people who follow you based on a video that's not representative of your channel. So you soon lose those people because once after that, once the mortgage overpayment video pops up, they're like, "What on earth is this that I've subscribed to?" And then I think they quickly unsubscribe. But I think, yeah, in general, I think it's a creative outlet more than anything. So I think having the occasional video like that, I think is good. I mean, some of the things that I want to um kind of post about going forward, I want to do some cooking videos, not like how to cook, but more like I use BBC Good Food quite a bit, like the recipes online.
Mm.
And one of the sort of videos I want to do is like how much 5 recipes on BBC Good Food costs to make, and like a bit of like a review of it. And similarly, there's lots of different recipe sort of places you can go for free. So Tesco have their own recipes online, and I use quite a lot of them. But I think
Mm.
sometimes it's quite interesting because I think when people thinking about budgeting, they want to put money, and but I still want to eat in a healthy way. I want to eat
Yeah.
nice meals, so it's trying to kind of document that a bit. And then I've also been charting some kind of health, kind of personal development goals. So cutting out caffeine, walking more. So yeah, putting more information about that online. But yeah, I mean, I think I'm enjoying it, and I guess I think the important thing is to remember, I guess, with any choices I make, is I'm making the best choices I can at the time with the information available now. I think
Yeah.
one of the worries is with anything, will I wake up on my 40th birthday and wish I'd just blown all my money
Mhm.
every single month? Maybe I will. Will I wake up on my 40th birthday and say, why did I overpay my mortgage? Why didn't I do X, Y, or Z? Um, yeah, maybe I'll think that. I mean, I've just recorded a podcast with someone I went to school with. I did that
Oh,
on Thursday. That was pushing myself out my comfort zone. So I think having like a video series, like this, like, I did it, you were my first guest on mine, and then I that was pushing myself out my comfort zone. But because you were also kind of just someone online, there was no repercussions if that conversation went
it didn't go
badly.
well.
But whereas like this person who I knew when I was at school, I'm like, if it's an awkward conversation, then I don't know. It just there
Will
was
they see you in a different light or anything like
yeah,
that?
yeah, things like that. But I was talking to them, and the reason I was talking to them was because they've got their own property business, where they buy property and rent it out. And it got me thinking, like, oh, like, should I be um putting more of my money towards buying property, buy to let, things. And to be honest, I don't know what the answer to that is. I think for me, if I'm wanting to lifestyle where I can take career breaks, is having responsibility of properties at home that have tenants in that are going to maybe be contacting me, or like,
Mm.
do I really want that life if I want to be a bit more nomadic in the future in some sense? Probably not, but it's important to have conversations with people to think about these things and see how people are building their own wealth. And even
Yeah.
like chatting to you, I got a lot from our conversation about, different things that you've done and tried out, websites, cryptocurrency, like these different things that you're doing to try and build wealth. Some things that I haven't thought of that it's really good to just talk about, and then I'll mull over and come to my own thinking about whether that's right for me or not.
Yeah, everyone's got their own backstory as well, which is partly what's super interesting about just having two people sit down and have a conversation, isn't it? That you might not necessarily agree with how they approach something or why they do what they do, but you can see why they do what they do and their thinking. And I guess maybe looping back to the kind of social media, YouTube, Instagram conversation we were having, I think that's sometimes missed, isn't it, on those platforms? I think it's quite difficult to get across a lot of the reasoning behind why you're doing something or how you're approaching something. Um, and something
Yeah.
that I would say more, I think, in videos is that, especially because I've shared kind of what I've been doing, people can copy what I'm doing, but they can't copy my conviction in what I'm doing and that kind of background thinking. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of people just blindly follow what they see online.
I think that's a really important point. I mean, the psychology of money, which is, a really kind of famous book now, that really covers that topic of behavior and money, and how two people might have exactly the same options of what they can do with the money and the same information, but they might come to two different conclusions and make two different decisions. And for me, one of those things is mortgage overpayments. I post a video, and every single video, normally without fail, someone comments and says, "Oh, your mortgage interest rate is really low. Why aren't you putting money in a savings account that gets you 5%?" Da, 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 da. And I understand that's a rational argument that makes sense, but for me personally, I know what my behavior is like. I dip into bank accounts. When that money's locked away, I don't touch it. Whereas if I don't know, thousands of pounds sat there in a bank account that was building up, I could probably convince myself that I could spend part of that on a holiday. Or, it's like
Yeah,
temptation there. I know what my behavior is like. And yeah, I'd love to be this robotic, always rational human being, but I'm just not that. I give into temptation at times. I have emotions as well, because I think money is emotional. This part aspects of money that I get emotional with. aspects that I don't. You know, me and my partner, for example, we have different approaches to certain things. So, like, for example, I'll give you one example, my partner, he gets money off relatives for Christmas. He has to spend that money, like particularly the money he's been given, on like something that he's wanting. Like, so I don't know if he's wanting to buy, I don't know, new CDs or something. I don't know. He'll have to use that money. Whereas for me, I'll just put that money I get in like a general pot of money. So I would spend it on, I don't know, going shopping or whatever. My weekly food shop, I'd spend Christmas
Yeah.
money on that. It's got no kind of emotional tie to me, but for him, he needs to know that the money he's got from someone is went for a treat. And it's just interesting because even though on paper you might not understand that nuance, you know, when you talk to someone about what their reasoning is, you get a feel for it.
Yeah. I think that's often overlooked by people as well. And I think that's why the kind of personal finance space is so interesting as well, in that there's no black and white answers for pretty much anything. In that, I guess mortgage overpayments is quite a good example, isn't it? Because there's the psychological peace of mind to owning your own home outright. Um, it reduces your outgoings. So you have more flexibility. Say if you're bringing money in, I think that's the same for pretty much everything. I think I particularly notice it as well, where maybe as someone who's sort of documenting more of the investing side, I don't document a lot of the reasoning behind a lot of the decisions I make, and I do that because I don't think there is a black and white answer. So a lot of the time, I can put some numbers to a company, you can read their statements, you can model something out with however you want to appraise that company's value. But there's a lot of it which is just reading guidance from people, reading people's thoughts on it, reading sentiment news articles. There's a lot of it that you can't quantify. And I think that's what's so interesting about personal finance, is that that's why I enjoy following people's journeys online, because you get a window into their life and it might be different from how you view things. And that's not necessarily right or wrong.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think, you know, when we had our discussion, we talked about tolerance to risk and where that comes from. So, you know, well, it appears to me you're a lot more tolerant to risk than I am. But, you know, we talked a bit about
People would panic
upbringing.
if they saw like a 30% drop in their kind of investments in a month. I was like, that's another month.
But we talked about it and it seemed like, you know, your upbringing, you know, you talked about your dad moving jobs, you know, and that being like a part and parcel of of life, that you might, you know, he would move jobs and there may be that uncertainty there. Whereas for me, my parents stayed in the same jobs um
Mm,
all the time, you know, and I think for me, a lot of my tolerance risk comes from their lack of tolerance to risk. So I think that's something, that background that shapes you. And
yeah,
yeah, sometimes, even though sometimes it's experience, isn't it? If you've been burned by something before, even though all the information says that you should be kind of optimistic about this thing, if you've had a negative experience of it, you're probably going to be shying away from it. Yeah, because I think that's what, I can't remember what period it was, but you know, people say about the stock market, and you know, there's this famous kind of graph that you see in the long term. You know, things always go up, but there are set periods where you might have been brought up, like, I don't know if it's kind of post-war in the US, and there's like maybe a 10-year period where the stock market was really kind of on the decline, and there's maybe a lot of, like, there's a generation there who maybe lost a lot of
come
money.
across it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then they've been really burned, but like affected by it, and then that is sort of passed on generationally because they'll hear stories from their parents or grandparents about that. So it has these impacts, and I guess if you haven't been through that, or your family hasn't been through that, then you're probably unaware of some people's mindsets.
Yeah. So, so knowing what you know now, if you could wind the clock back to your 18-year-old self, say you've maybe just finished school, you've not started uni yet, what advice would you give to yourself? What is there anything you would change in what you've done with hindsight? Or, I mean, I don't know. Hopefully, you feel quite content with the decisions you've made. But is there any advice you would give yourself?
Yeah,
Knowing what you know now?
it's an interesting question, and it's got us thinking. I mean, I think more generally, it's probably having a less of a fear of trying things and not having so many limiting beliefs about ability. Like I think what I've realized from, and particularly from YouTube and hearing other people, watching your videos, watching other people's videos, is that some people have a very abundant mindset of thinking, actually, I'm gonna bet on myself, take risks, and even if it doesn't work out, I'm happy to have taken a risk, then not done anything about it. Whereas from being young, I think I probably always, I wouldn't say I've stayed in my comfort zone, but I've always sort of stayed within the perimeters of my comfort zone. I haven't went too far outside of it. And I've struggled with uncertainty in life. So when things happen at work where there's a lot of uncertainty about it, that's when I kind of struggle and I worry. But actually, I, I've learned that I probably have to do more to put myself in situations that has some sort of uncertainty in them or where I might feel a bit nervous. So part of doing YouTube puts you in that sort of sphere anyways, like it's when I first started, there was a lot of worry about putting myself on on the microphone, like how do I sound?
Mm.
Am I using filler words? Like all these things. But actually, once you just start doing something, I think that's the key. It's like just start doing something and just learning as you go. And now, I'm, into my YouTube journey and I have people who regularly watch my videos and comment on them. And, some of the things that I thought people might comment on, about how I sound when I speak, so on. People don't comment, people don't say anything about it. It's all sort of negative perceptions in my own head. And
Mm.
I think sometimes when you've got these things that hold you back, I look back at my 20s and I think, what opportunities did I not take because I was worried about certain things and I wanted to avoid a worst case scenario. So I think that's the thing I want to do. And I mean, I look at this, we wouldn't be having this conversation if I hadn't sort of put myself out there on YouTube, and I think that's
Mm.
the thing, there's experiences I've had through posting blogs, videos, so on that, have been a really great experience, and I just want to continue doing more of that in life. So for example, this morning I was doing a creative writing course at my
Nice.
local library. So I thought, what, I've always wanted to try out writing, So this one's more on the fiction side of things, but I was there with a group of 10 people and were writing with a facilitator and sort of having to then read out what we'd written and stuff. But it was good, it was something different, it's it got us out my comfort zone. So that's my challenge really, is just keep putting myself out my comfort zone and also saying yes to scary things at work. Because things crop up where I get asked to present at, conferences and things, and sometimes I'm like, "Oh, why did that ask us? Like, just leave us alone." But then actually I'm trying to get more in a habit of saying yes to it and then
Mm.
not worrying too much about stage fright that might happen or so on, and just doing it.
Maybe you could present them as the Geordie Saver as your alternate conference.
Well,
Okay.
I did one in February, and I had a real worry that I was gonna start it with, "Hello, I'm the Geordie Saver," and I thought, God, like I've got right, remember to say your actual name, because obviously, like I'm more used now to presenting through this than I am at work, and I thought that would be a really hard thing to try and explain to a room full of people. Um,
Yeah, I mean that's one of the things that I really hate doing is public speaking. I've never enjoyed it, and I think the only reason I can do YouTube is because I'm only talking to a camera, and I don't sort of see it as talking to other people in a way. It almost feels like talking to myself, which probably singles me out as crazy or something. But
Yeah, I do think it's helped me with presenting at work though, because I'm so used to pressing record now and
Mm.
talking
Just going
on the
for it.
spot. It means that at work, obviously I prepare more when I present at work, but it means that if I get caught off guard by a question, I'm a bit more used to thinking on my feet, which is good. Because I used to just get horribly nervous before presenting at work, and I used to show my voice and things, and now I'm getting a bit more
Relaxed
comfortable
and
with the
used to it.
nerves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have noticed as well that I think the quality of your voiceovers in your videos has got better as well. I think there used to be more breaks and ums and ahs, and I think you've really improved that. And I think that's, I don't know, it's probably worth going back and watching some of your old videos if you haven't watched them for a while, and then compare them to your new ones. Because I think when I've watched your videos, I've noticed them improve considerably through that. And, it's just sort of a bit of encouragement that I think it is good in other ways, even if, it's just a YouTube channel documenting your journey. It's helping you in ways that maybe you haven't necessarily thought about.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, thanks for that because filler words are something that I find really hard to move away from using. And actually, a story about work is that I think it was 2 years ago, we started having using Microsoft Teams, and in Microsoft Teams you can record presentations and calls, and then you can play them back. Now, at first, everyone was like, "Oh, this is brilliant," until you get to a meeting where you're presenting, and then you have the temptation to listen to it back. Well, I listened to a presentation I was giving back, and I thought the presentation went well, and I was devastated when I listened to it back because all I said with every single sentence was kind of, kind of, kind of, and I was like, I sound like a fool. Like, why did no one pull us aside and say, look, you're using too many filler words? But it just became such a natural thing to do. And I think when you're nervous, you use more filler words because you try and close the silence, like you don't want silence. But
Yeah.
really, I think what I've learned is if I need to think about something, I'm probably better to just shut my mouth and just wait for the thought to arrive than trying to fill up the gap with filler words. But yeah, it makes you really appreciate when you watch people on TV because they
Mm.
are presenters. People say, "Oh, presenting this morning is such an easy job." I'm thinking, well, if I was on this morning presenting, I would be using all the filler words because I'd be so nervous. You would just have an hour and a half of me saying and ah. Whereas when you watch those people, they do not use any filler words at
Mm.
all. And I think you have a new appreciation when you try and do things yourself for how hard it is to convey messages and keep people interested and change the tone of your voice. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things, isn't it, where it's only really noticed when it goes wrong.
Yeah.
And when it works well, no one really notices. It's just normal conversation, isn't it? And working as sort of a civil engineer as well in the background, we say the same thing. People only notice when we do our job badly because a sewer floods or a road gets
Yeah.
destroyed or something or a bridge falls down. um, so that's I think where I'm gonna wrap it up there. Unless there's anything else that you want to touch on while we're here.
Yeah, actually, there was one thing, and it's just because it's been ruminating on my mind
Mm.
recently, and I know you commented on my video, and it'd be quite good to get your thoughts on it. And I think it's probably um just about where the boundaries are for talking about finance online, particularly
Mm.
with financial advice. So I know that both me and you were very um strict in terms of the fact that we're very clear that we're not financial advisors, with disclaimers on our videos and so on. But for people listening, the Financial Conduct Authority recently released their guidance, updated guidance on financial promotions for kind of content creators and firms who are using content creators to advertise financial products. And when you read it, I find it really difficult to
Mm.
understand where the line is. So one of the things I talked about, which really struck me, was the talk about acting in the course of business. So
Mm.
even if you're not being financially compensated by an investment platform for talking about them online, if you're making a video about them, that's going to attract views that you might be monetized for by the FCA. You might be viewed as acting in the course of them. So if
Mm.
you're giving any sort of recommendations there about a platform that you're using and you're getting monetized for it, you might be liable, I guess, for being classed as promoting something financially when you're not an advisor. Now, I did get in contact with the FCA about this. I emailed them with a list of very specific questions about, you know, if I'm making video X, is that within the guidelines or does it breach them? And unfortunately, and I should have expected this, they came back and said that they can't actually tell us. Like they can point to the guidance, but they're
Do you get
not.
taken to court? You don't know.
Yeah, they're not allowed to tell us whether I comply. And I sort of understand from an operational perspective, they probably don't want to be inundated with people asking them whether they're complying. And also, how do they keep track of if they send it say in an email to me that I comply and then I make a different sort of video that doesn't comply,
Mm,
if could I use that as evidence to say, well, they said I was complying? So I understand it from that perspective, but because the guidance I find isn't really clear cut in terms of, people like me and you who
mm.
are making our sort of videos, I find it a bit hard. And their advice was, oh, you just have to seek professional advice from a compliance officer or legal advice. And I'm thinking, I'm not paying like a fortune for
Yeah,
someone to tell us for something that I'm not actually making money off currently. But I think because I'm a worrier and I'm very intolerant to certain risks. Obviously, the risk of paying a big fine or going to jail, that's a huge risk for me, which I don't want to do. And everyone I know I posted a video about this. Everyone on my video who commented said, you're really worrying about nothing because there's bigger fish to fry than you on YouTube. There's a lot of people who are, posting actual advice when they're not advisors. But yeah, I just wondered what your thoughts were about it, if you had mulled over it at all.
yeah. So I hadn't come across it actually until you posted that video. I knew there was some guidance. I know there's been a crackdown in a couple of other countries. So especially, I know it came down pretty hard in Australia, for example. There's a couple of people I've watched where the guidance there is really tough. Um, I think I agree with you. When I read the document, I skipped first straight to the like examples section because there was like a section at the near the back where they gave some examples. And my first takeaway from the examples was, oh yeah, it's just, bog standard run of the mill kind of advice where it's like we want to make sure everything's transparent and clear. But then, like you said, it's the in the course of business section that really muddied the water for me. And when you said that people saying, oh, there's bigger fish to fry and things like that, I think I disagree with that point in that just because you're a small time player, it's like, let's take it out of context and put it into another context. Let's say, I don't know, you're a drug dealer. If you're a small time drug dealer, does that change what you're doing? The
Yeah.
fact that, so I think from that point of view, I am slightly concerned about it. So what I've been doing is just trying to make sure that I'm completely transparent about it. So if there's something where, like if there's a platform that I use, so for example, I've used like Trading 212 for my stocks and shares ISA, there's like a free share scheme with that where if someone signs up with your link, then you both get like a free share. So there's like a compensation incentive there, whether it's like a business agreement as such or anything like that is to be questioned. So I think I've just been trying to make sure that I'm completely transparent so that people are aware that if I'm saying something that there is like a bias below it, that I do use the platform, I can receive a compensation from it. But then the next line after that, so I was quite comfortable with that, but I think that as long as you're transparent with that, I came to the conclusion that I'd be happy with it. But it's when, say, you get to the point where your YouTube channel is big enough where you can get ads on your videos and you receive ad payments. Well, what if you've got a video where you're showing you doing something and you're not promoting, you're not trying to encourage anyone to sign up, you're not anything, but just by the fact that you're using it, people might try and use that product. So they're like, oh, Chaz is using that product or the Geordie Saver is using that. I've seen like a screen share that he's done where he's using this particular website or this particular service. Then you're kind of being paid to show that product off, even if you're not incentivized to doing that. So I think the conclusion I've come to is that if my channel gets to that size, I will rewrite a disclaimer on my channel. So I try and put disclaimers on videos where I think it needs a disclaimer. And then every description on my video has a disclaimer.
Yeah.
I think I would try and include very specific things and maybe in a pinned comment. I'm not sure. I'm not at that stage yet, so I've not had to think of it any further. I think, yeah, while I'm small and just sharing my own journey. I think it's about transparency because, at the heart of the problem is they want to get rid of actors who are trying to promote outright scams or kind of get people to sign up to things where there's some maybe financial reward, but it's not in their best interest. Like if I was the regulator, that's why I would produce the regulations for. So I think as long as I'm trying to be clear with biases that I may have, then even though the as the course of business phrase is really woolly and scares me slightly, I've come to the conclusion I think that's okay. Um, yeah, I mean, as you say, it's not clear to me, and I'm not a legal expert. I don't think I would ever be able to decipher legal texts, even when they're supposedly
Yeah.
presented in quite a friendly to read format like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think I understand why, like, I completely understand why they put them in place because, as you say, you want to prevent people being scammed online and all that. I think what I worry about with it is probably just so I found out about the, mortgage overpayments, all that. I mainly found out about it through hearing other people's journeys. So listening to people talk about their investment journey and things like that and doing my own research. But if you take away the opportunity for people to speak about that, does then personal finance and the tools, does that then just become something that only people whose families are well off hear about? Because, that classic example of maybe someone who's very middle class, whose parents invest, so therefore that's how they found out about investing. But for other people whose parents don't invest or weren't as clued up about money, where did they get their
Information
information
from.
from? Yeah, and that's a worry I have. Like, I think there has to be a balance somewhere, but if we're going to be in a society where you're not allowed to talk about investment online, I think, well, how is anyone ever going to find out about it? And how can you
Yeah.
be? Because I think for me and you, we're transparent about the journey and we show our returns each month, so people get an overall understanding of the risks that come with investing. Um, but
Mm.
I understand on the other side of the coin, there's people who are just very clickbaity who have video titles like "This will make you 1 million in 2 years," and
Yeah.
it's probably some crypto thing that they're doing. And I understand that's
Mm.
not great. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's personally why I've tried to avoid explaining in detail why I've picked things that I invest in, for example. I think the only times when I would maybe be happy to talk about that is if there was some kind of diversified index fund and I was talking about the merits of that. But like individual investments just seems like a step too far for me, and I've tried to avoid that kind of side of things, even though I'm well aware of seeing other YouTube videos and things like that. They attract a lot of attention, and people do love to watch those kind of things. It's the same reason why there's financial analysts out there, financial professionals who sell their services, and you need licenses to give financial advice. And there's reasons those are in place. It's because bad advice can go a long way to damaging someone's future. Um, so yeah, it is a difficult environment to be in. And to be honest, I see so much stuff out there that is just like downright bad advice or scams, in my opinion. And, I kind of welcome the fact that the FCA is recognizing, as they call it, finfluencers, which I don't know how I feel about that term, but yeah, I like that there is some movement in that fact. I think the fact that there is transparency in what we do, and I think we're both very clear that we're sharing personal journeys. I think the fact that we're definitely not even trying to dress this up as like financial advice is quite. I think it puts us on the right side of the line, is my feeling. But again, maybe if the channel blows up, some proper advice is needed there. So yeah, I don't know whether that puts your mind at ease or makes it worse.
Yeah, I mean, you never know. Someone might maybe someone will do one of these big YouTubers will sit down with a legal expert and ask all the questions for us, and we'll get some clarity that way. Um, yeah, because I mean that was my only criticism of what the FCA are doing, is that they put out these guidelines, but there's still a bit of lack of clarity there. So but yeah, I think the intentions like from myself and you are good. We're not trying to scam people or anything. So I think it's just making sure that, we've got the disclaimers there, definitely.
Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. I did after you posted, I did do some sort of research. I actually watched a few sort of YouTube videos and read a few articles online about it as well. And I was quite interested to see. I don't know whether maybe this has just been outside the bubble that I live in, but some people were really critical of like the FCA and how they've approached things. And I'm aware that there is some of that kind of approach in the US where everyone seems to be like, oh yeah, the regulators are out to stop this little guy. But I mean, I genuinely don't think they are. I don't know if you've seen any sort of pushback on that or any sort of people just saying, this is a load of rubbish, or whether it has just been, some serious contemplation and discussion around it.
Yeah, no, I mean, the only thing that came up, and you touched on it before, was about what had happened in Australia where there was stricter regulations. There was someone on my Instagram who actually used to live in Newcastle and then moved to Australia. So someone who's following me, they messaged me and they'd said, you know, they follow a lot of UK creators now rather than Australian, because the Australian creators were very limited in what they could share
Mm.
online. And I think a lot of it was more that there was, because of the regulations that were put out, they were very fearful of what the repercussions might be. So they just kind of deleted all the blog posts or deleted things, and they had to be very general about what they were saying. So he was just saying, for him, he found it was stifling a lot of creativity and a lot of sort of innovation in the space, because people were worried about what messages they were putting online.
Yeah, it does just make the space very sort of monochromatic, doesn't it? In that everyone just ends up talking about the same things if you're really restricted what you can talk about, and it's not necessarily helpful. But I can maybe see why the regulator might prefer it that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been interesting to hear your thoughts on that as well, actually, via your video and just sort of a quick chat now, because it's not something I chat with people every day about because most people aren't in that situation.
Yeah, I know it is. And I think that's the thing. I think when you're making content online, it is like a solo venture, and then people, like my partner, doesn't know enough about it to understand what the nuances are between talking about investments and talking about, you know, budgeting. He doesn't understand what the difference there is. And nor do other people who I talk to. So yeah, it is useful to just get other thoughts on it. And as I said, I'm waiting for someone who is one of the bigger UK YouTubers to talk about it, because as soon as I see them like changing their
Yeah,
changing
they
their
could be taking some
direction,
legal advice.
yeah, I'll be yeah, I'll have my ears open to see what they're doing.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
actually end up looking up how do you become a financial advisor? What qualifications do you need? After that, I was like, maybe it's worth just like taking the exams just for the sake of it. It's probably off the cards at the moment though for me. Well, great. Thank you very much for sitting down and sort of having this chat. I've enjoyed it. It's been nice to learn a little bit more about you as well. Just the side of you that we don't often hear about just through the YouTube channel. And as someone who doesn't have Instagram, I don't necessarily see through your Instagram posts. I'm looking forward to more of your content, following your journey. And yeah, we'll have to do this again maybe in sort of like 12 months' time and see if anything's changed.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think it'd be a good like thing, maybe once a year do a chat on mine and once a year do a chat on yours or something, and see how yeah, how things have changed, and if we're sort of still in the same sort of mindset, or if we've changed direction. So you
Yeah.
never know. Maybe this time next year I'll have sold my flat and I'll be on a year-long cruise, because I'm trying to trying to live.
Travel vlogging your way across Asia
Yeah,
or something.
travel. I'm a travel vlogger. Yeah, be talking to you from some exotic island. You never know.
Cool. Great. Thank you very much for watching. If you're watching this on YouTube, I'll leave links down in the description below for the Geordie Savers channel. I'll also pop just a link down to maybe you can send it to me your Instagram as well, and then I'll pop a link down to the reverse conversation as well, which is hosted on the Geordie Savers channel. And we'd love to just hear some of your thoughts in the comments down below. If you've got any questions, I'm sure the Geordie Saver will be there to try and dip in and out of the comments to answer anything that you may want a bit more information about or clarity on, if there's anything that was a bit vague that we spoke about. But thanks very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.